Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Sharon Ivy Jones always put her daughter first. Her little girl was only 2 years old in 2002, and she had been Sharon's priority since she was born. Sharon was also raising her as a single mom, but her daughter's father was still in the picture, and Sharon wanted to make sure she did whatever she could for her daughter to have the best possible upbringing. Sharon was known from a very young age to love children. She was a teaching assistant in a pre-K class and truly enjoyed what she did. The kids and their parents all loved her as well, as did her colleagues. In 2002, Sharon was living a quiet life in Norfolk, Virginia. Her focus was her daughter, first and foremost, but she also loved her job. She did enjoy hanging out with friends, however, as a single mom, that did not get to happen very often. But in September of that year, Sharon had an opportunity for a night out. Her friend was getting married, and her daughter was going to stay that weekend with her father. Sharon took her time picking out an outfit and getting ready, and left to attend her friend's wedding the afternoon of September 21st. After the wedding was over, a few friends decided to go out for some drinks and continue hanging out for a bit. Since Sharon rarely had the opportunity to do so, and she knew her daughter was being cared for, she took advantage of the time with friends. Afterwards, she took a friend home and dropped her off around 3 o'clock a.m. She mentioned she was going to stop at the Taco Bell on her way home and then drove off. But from there, everything is a mystery. Sharon never showed up to pick up her daughter, and later her family found her apartment in disarray with her car parked in her assigned parking spot. Yet Sharon was nowhere to be found. Where is Sharon Ivy Jones? Hello, everyone, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Where Are They podcast. Sharon's case is so baffling and troubling that it truly is beyond comprehension to me as to why her story hasn't received more media coverage. Now, I do want to give a shout out to news channel WTKR in Norfolk, Virginia, as they were the only mainstream media, it seemed, to really give her story the time of day. So, huge kudos to WTKR. But needless to say, information was very difficult to find on her story and even harder to verify the details that we do have. But her family has struggled for so long to find answers and has been heartbroken for over 20 years. So let's talk about what we do know. Sharon Ivy Jones was born on October 17, 1968 in New Jersey to parents Thelma and Bobby. She was raised up alongside her younger sister, Stephanie, and had a normal, happy childhood by all accounts. After high school, Sharon moved to Norfolk, Virginia, and attended Norfolk State University. After college, she remained in the area working as a teaching assistant for the pre-K program at the local public schools. She really enjoyed what she did, and she was very well liked by everyone. Now, I don't know much about her personality specifically, or really much about any hobbies or interests that she may have had, but everyone who knew her and did come out to speak about her describes her as likable, easygoing, and pretty low-key. She was never into drugs of any kind. She wasn't a partier, and she wasn't a drinker, except maybe at the occasional big event, such as maybe a wedding. Sharon did meet a man, George, with whom she did have a relationship with, and together they had a little girl. Sharon and George would break up, however, and Sharon became the sole caretaker for their daughter. Now, again, I'm not privy to specific details about their relationship. Sharon did have sole custody, and we do know that George occasionally did help out as well. Now, In September of 2002, Sharon is 33 years old and her daughter is 2 years old. She is living at the Breezy Point Apartments in Norfolk, and she is working as a teaching assistant. On September 21st, 2002, Sharon was happy and excited. She would be having a much-needed afternoon and night out. Her friend was getting married, and she would be going to the wedding and hopefully hanging out with friends after. She took her daughter to stay with George for the night. Now, Sharon did go to that wedding, and she had a blast. She was having so much fun with friends that a few of them decided to continue hanging out at a local dance club for a little bit. Now, just before 3 o'clock a.m., Sharon and a friend decided it was time for them to go home. Sharon dropped her friend off at her friend's house, mentioning that she might stop at the Taco Bell on the way back to her apartment. She needed to get some sleep as she had to pick up her daughter the next day. But the next day came, and Sharon never showed up to pick up her daughter. George was unable to reach her by phone also. This was absolutely not like Sharon. First, she was always in contact with everyone. And secondly, knowing how devoted she was to their daughter, she would absolutely never miss picking her up and would never be out of touch via phone either. Now, after some time, George called her parents, who decided to drive down to Norfolk from their home in New Jersey. Now, I do want to mention, I'm not sure if George ever drove over to see if Sharon was at her apartment. I'm not sure if he reached out to friends. I would assume probably so. And it would seem to me that he would have driven over to Sharon's apartment, not being able to reach her, unless he had lived quite far away. Now, her parents definitely lived far away. They were up near Red Bank, New Jersey. What is noted in the file is that her parents showed up with investigators to Sharon's apartment. First, they noticed that her car was parked in her normal parking spot. Then, they realized the front door to her apartment was unlocked. Upon entering the apartment, they found no signs of Sharon anywhere, but they did find signs of a disturbance. Items were strewn about. The place was kind of a mess. There were some items that were even broken on the floor. And maybe most alarming of all, 2 telephones, 2 landline phones were ripped out of the wall. And for those of you who are too young to recall, yes, telephones used to have to be plugged into the wall. Now, the only reason I can think of for anyone to rip them out of the wall, especially 2 different phones, would be so that somebody could not use them to call out. So it definitely looked as if there had been some type of struggle in the apartment. And there were a few other things noted about the scene also. Her cell phone was still there, sitting on the counter. Her purse, keys, and wallet, however, did seem to be missing. It was also noted that the clothing that she had worn the night before, the clothing she had worn to the wedding, and then out with friends, was located there in the apartment. So where was Sharon? Her car was in the lot, her cell phone was there, but her keys were missing, and most importantly, Sharon was missing. But she had obviously been at the apartment at some point because her clothing was there. So what happened in that apartment? Now, besides the obvious signs of a struggle, investigators also noted that there was no blood, and after a more thorough examination, they found no DNA at all. Nothing here seemed to make sense. So authorities did start talking to everyone who knew Sharon, and they were able to verify the events of the night of September 21st into the morning hours of September 22nd. They also brought George in for questioning, who cooperated fully and even offered up his DNA just in case. They asked if he would take a lie detector test. He said absolutely, and he did, and the results came back inconclusive. Now, did George know more than he was saying? It's really hard to tell. He seemed to be more than cooperative. Authorities didn't announce any other type of evidence that might point to him, such as any relationship problems, any history of violence. And we know that lie detector tests are notoriously unreliable. Now, George has also spoken up publicly and said that he cannot even begin to imagine what would have happened to Sharon. He wasn't aware of any enemies that she may have had, and he said she certainly was not the type to bring a man home with her. Also, when she had dropped our friend off at home at 3 a.m., Sharon was alone. Now, investigators were able to verify that she did indeed drop her friend off at 3 o'clock and was headed towards her home. But there are still some unanswered questions from here. She had mentioned stopping at a Taco Bell, but it could never be verified if she did indeed stop. And is that important? Well, maybe. Maybe Taco Bell would have had surveillance video showing if she was indeed alone or not. Or perhaps if someone saw her at Taco Bell and followed her home. But we just don't know. There's been no verification that she stopped at any Taco Bell. There was also no indication in any of the records that anyone at the apartment complex heard any type of disturbance, which is quite odd to me. If there was such disarray in the apartment, things were broken, cords were ripped out of the wall, how did nobody in any of the adjacent apartments or buildings not hear anything? Even if it was in the wee hours of the morning, surely someone might have woken up to those sounds, but it seems that nobody heard anything. And then there's the struggle itself. Something happened, but there was no blood. Was Sharon maybe incapacitated in some way that would not cause blood? And then there's the fact that if she was somehow incapacitated, she had to have been taken out of the apartment without anybody seeing. If that is indeed what happened, or did she leave on her own 2 feet? Now, there would be no additional clues to go on, at least any additional clues that authorities have released. And Sharon's family has been pretty outspoken with how furious they have been with law enforcement from the beginning, stating that they never took Sharon's disappearance seriously. And consequently, the media wasn't too interested in covering her story either, with the exception of WTKR. Sharon must have been taken away from the area, likely in another vehicle. And there are 3 main thought processes on what might have happened here. Number 1, someone was with Sharon when she arrived home, and then something happened after they were inside the apartment. Or number 2, someone was waiting for Sharon when she arrived to her apartment. And number 3, someone arrived at Sharon's place after she did, likely someone that she knew since there were no signs of forced entry, and she let them in. But there was never any motive or possible motive released. And as far as anyone knew who has spoken out, Sharon had no enemies. Who would have a motive to hurt Sharon? The Breezy Point apartments where Sharon lived are located on the north side of Norfolk, very near the water. In fact, Norfolk has 144 miles of waterfront. Norfolk, Virginia is also the hub of the world's largest naval complex, anchored by Naval Station Norfolk. The area hosts major commands for the Navy, Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. So, of course, that is a major concern in a missing person investigation, the sheer amount of water that surrounds that area. Sadly, in 2003, Sharon's younger sister passed away. Losing both daughters close together certainly had to bring so much anguish and heartbreak to Bobby and Thelma. Bobby and Thelma did take over custody of Sharon's daughter and would go on to raise her. She is now a young adult. Thelma said that often she didn't want to go on. It was just too difficult for her, and she was beyond heartbroken. But she knew she had to be strong and care for her granddaughter, as Sharon would have wanted. Sharon's daughter and her parents often traveled back and forth from their home in New Jersey to Norfolk to continue searching for Sharon, often saying that sometimes they would just get in the car and drive around, sometimes aimlessly, just looking for her. So what do you think happened to Sharon Jones? Sharon is described as a Black female standing around 5'4" tall and weighing around 130 pounds when she was last seen in September of 2002. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She also has a round vaccination scar on her upper left arm and a tattoo of the character Tweety Bird on her right upper arm at the shoulder. If you have any information at all regarding the disappearance of Sharon Ivy Jones, please contact the Norfolk Police Department at 757-664-7291. And remember, you can always contact Crime Stoppers as well if you want to be anonymous. Thank you so much for listening to Sharon's story today and for being a supporter of our show. It's the support from you all that keep us going, and I can't thank you enough. We will be back again very soon with another unsolved missing persons story. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.